Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into Yemen. You've sent over the Wikipedia article.
Okay.
So we're going beyond the headlines, to uncover what makes this nation so unique.
Excellent choice. Yemen's often overshadowed by conflict,
Yeah?
but there's a rich tapestry of history and culture and geopolitics there
Right.
that stretches back thousands of years.
Thousands.
We're talking older than ancient Greece, ancient Rome, civilizations that, let's be honest, get a lot more airtime,
That's true, yeah.
and for good reason.
It's not every day you hear about a place with ties to the Queen of Sheba, right?
Right.
And being the origin point of coffee long before mocha was even a glimmer in a coffee bean's eye, that's pretty cool.
The article mentions Yemen being at this crossroads of civilizations for over 7,000 years.
It's amazing how those ancient connections still echo today.
For example, the Sabaean kingdom and their great dam of Marib. This wasn't just some pile of rocks.
Right.
It was a feat of engineering that allowed them to thrive in a very arid land.
Wow.
They understood the value of water management, something that's still so relevant in Yemen today.
Speaking of things that are still relevant, the article dives into Yemen's complex history.
Yeah.
We're talking Roman expeditions, the Himyarite kingdom, the arrival of Islam, a whole procession of dynasties.
It's a lot.
It's a lot to unpack. Where do we even begin?
Well, I think it's important to recognize the recurring theme here. Powerful empires vying for control.
Okay.
Romans, Ottomans, British, they all saw Yemen's strategic importance.
Right.
This external pressure constantly shaped Yemen's social and political landscape, often adding fuel to the fire of internal conflicts.
It's like layer upon layer of history, each one leaving its mark.
Definitely.
And it's not just about coffee, even though that's a big one. The article highlights how crucial Yemen's location was and still is for trade routes, right?
Absolutely. And that brings us a little closer to modern-day Yemen.
Okay.
The article talks about the country's unification in 1990, but also the challenges that followed. Poverty, water scarcity, which we've already touched on, and political instability, the rise of groups like AQAP and the Houthis.
Yeah.
Tragically, these are some of the factors that have pushed Yemen into the devastating civil war we see today.
It's easy to gloss over headlines, but this is a stark reminder that we're talking about real people grappling with incredibly complex issues.
It is?
The article mentions a staggering statistic: over 24 million people in need of humanitarian aid. To put that in perspective, that's more than the entire population of Australia.
It's a sobering thought, and it underscores the need for greater understanding and empathy.
Yeah.
Yemen is not just a conflict zone. It's a nation with a vibrant culture, resilient people, and a history worthy of exploration.
Speaking of exploring history, this ancient period has really piqued my curiosity.
Okay.
You mentioned the Sabaean kingdom and their incredible dam. Give me some more details. What made it so impressive?
We're talking about the Great Dam of Marib, constructed around 940 BC.
940 BC.
Imagine the ingenuity required to build something like that in that era,
Yeah.
especially in a region known for its dry climate.
Right.
This wasn't just a dam, it was a symbol of their advancement.
The article says it was crucial for their irrigation and agriculture. It's almost like a premonition, right? Like water scarcity has been a long-standing issue in Yemen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The Sabaeans understood this challenge centuries ago
Wow.
and created a system that sustained their civilization for hundreds of years.
Hundreds of...
Unfortunately, the dam suffered a major breach in the 6th century AD, which contributed to the decline of that era.
It's amazing how history seems to rhyme, isn't it? The echoes of the past still resonate in the present.
Yeah.
The article also talks about the Himyarite kingdom and its Jewish influences, not something you hear every day.
Right.
I have to admit, I didn't even know this existed.
What's fascinating about Yemen is how fluid the religious and cultural influences have been throughout its history. The Himyarite period, around the 3rd to 6th centuries AD, saw a significant Jewish presence, with rulers potentially even converting to Judaism. This adds another layer to our understanding of Yemeni society even today.
It's like every chapter of Yemen's story involves these fascinating cultural exchanges.
Definitely.
The arrival of Islam in the 7th century, as the article describes, must have been another pivotal moment.
Oh, absolutely.
What changed with that?
The article highlights how Yemeni tribes played a crucial role in the early spread of Islam.
Interesting.
This wasn't just about religion, it showcased their military strength and strategic importance within the Arabian Peninsula. They were forces to be reckoned with.
It's not hard to picture these Yemeni troops journeying across vast distances, spreading the word of Islam. You can almost feel the heat of the desert sun, smell the spices in the air.
And it wasn't just about military might. Yemen actually became a center of Islamic learning, with scholars and thinkers contributing to the religion's intellectual and theological development. It became a place of profound thought and scholarship.
Which makes me think about the incredible architecture mentioned in the article, like the Great Mosque of Sana'a. We've all seen pictures. They're breathtaking.
Talk about testaments to their craftsmanship and devotion. Sadly, a lot of Yemen's historical and architectural heritage has been threatened by the ongoing conflict.
It's heartbreaking to think about the potential losses, both in terms of human life and cultural treasures.
It is.
But even with these challenges, the article hints at this vibrant cultural scene, even a burgeoning film industry.
Resilience is deeply ingrained in Yemeni identity. From traditional music and dance to contemporary art forms, they find ways to express themselves and preserve their heritage. This isn't a people easily kept down.
Okay, so we've talked about the Sabaeans and the Himyarites,
Mm-hmm.
but the article mentions all these other dynasties rising and falling after Islam arrived. The Ziyadids, the Sulahids, the Ayyubids.
Right.
Were any of them particularly impactful?
Each dynasty left its mark, but the Sulahids,
Okay.
particularly under the rule of Queen Arwa al-Sulahi in the 11th century, really stand out.
Okay.
Imagine a queen ruling over Yemen, her name proclaimed in Friday prayers alongside her husband's, practically unheard of in the Islamic world at that time.
Talk about a powerful female figure. It
Yeah.
sounds like she was way ahead of her time.
Oh, she was.
What was her reign like?
She was known for her wisdom and justice, promoting stability and actually expanding the Sulayid influence.
Mm-hmm.
She even sent Ismaili missionaries as far as India,
Wow.
establishing a community that still exists today. Talk about a lasting legacy.
Wow, a queen with global impact. The article also mentions the Razula dynasty,
Yes.
who ruled from the 13th to 15th centuries.
Right.
They seem to leave a lasting impact as well.
They definitely did think. Golden Age scholarship trades cities like Taiz and Zabid flourishing as centers of learning. They even claimed the title of Caliph after Baghdad fell to the Mongols,
Really?
showing just how ambitious and influential they were.
Ambitious might be an understatement.
Yeah.
Claiming such a prestigious title, especially during those chaotic times, speaks volumes about their power. But I guess no reign lasts forever, right?
Unfortunately, no.
Mm-hmm.
Even the Razalids eventually crumbled, facing internal conflicts and external pressures. It's that recurring theme, again, a constant struggle for power, often influenced by forces outside Yemen's borders.
It's like this never-ending cycle, periods of flourishing followed by fragmentation and conflict.
Unfortunately, yes,
And that cycle unfortunately continues to shape Yemen today.
it does.
The article delves into the arrival of the Ottomans in the 16th century, yet another pivotal chapter in Yemen's story.
A big one.
Ah, the Ottomans, known for their vast empire. What drew them to Yemen? Were they after those legendary coffee beans?
Well, coffee was a factor later on,
Okay.
but ultimately it was about control, a familiar theme in Yemen's history. They wanted to dominate those strategic trade routes to India and safeguard the Islamic holy cities of Mecca and Medina from potential threats like the Portuguese, who were expanding their influence in the Indian Ocean at the time.
So basically, Yemen was a key piece in their geopolitical chess game.
You got it?
Did they succeed in controlling the whole country?
Not quite.
Okay.
They established a strong presence in the coastal regions, particularly around Zabid, Mocha, and Aden.
Mm-hmm.
But those northern highlands, a different story.
Okay.
Think rugged terrain, fiercely independent people.
The article mentions the Zaidi tribes putting up fierce resistance.
Yeah, they weren't going down without a fight.
Sounds like they weren't going down without a fight. Who were the Zaidis exactly?
Good question. The Zaydis follow the Zaydi Shia sect of Islam,
Okay.
and they were deeply entrenched in that mountainous north. They saw the Ottomans as invaders, plain and simple.
Mm-hmm.
Their resistance was relentless. We're talking decades of conflict and rebellion.
It's fascinating how religion played such a crucial role in shaping these power struggles. Yeah.
Did the Ottomans ever fully subdue the Zaydis?
Well, they did manage to capture Sana'a in the 19th century
Okay.
and officially made it the administrative capital of Yemen Vilayet. But their control remained shaky at best. Zaydi imams continuously challenged Ottoman authority, sparking uprisings and keeping things pretty unstable.
It sounds like the Ottomans had a real challenge on their hands trying to maintain order in Yemen.
They did.
Did their rule have any lasting impact? Did they at least bring some stability?
It was a mixed bag, to be honest.
Okay.
They tried to modernize the administration and boost the economy, but corruption ran rampant. Plus, their attempts to secularize Yemeni society clashed head-on with the population's deep-seated religious beliefs. You can't force change like that. A classic case of good intentions, maybe not the best execution. So what eventually happened to the Ottomans? Did they just pack up and leave?
They were already weakened by their own internal struggles and the growing tide of Arab nationalism in the early 20th century. Then, after their defeat in World War I, Ottoman rule in Yemen officially ended in 1918.
So the Ottomans exit the stage, but I'm guessing things didn't magically become peaceful in Yemen, right?
You guessed right.
Oh, no.
As the Ottomans were leaving, another power was already moving in down south. The British, they'd been gradually expanding their influence in the region since the 19th century.
Right.
Initially looking for a strategically important port on their route to India.
Right. The article talks about Aden becoming this bustling British colony and crucial port city. Was that a point of contention with the Ottomans?
Absolutely. The Ottomans saw British expansion as a threat to their own interests.
Right.
This tension definitely added fuel to the fire. And of course, the British presence in Aden would go on to shape Yemeni history for decades to come.
So as one empire fades, another one rises. Meanwhile, what was happening in the north after they gained their independence from Ottoman rule? Were they finally free to govern themselves?
In a way, yes. Imam Yahya Hamidaddin, a Zaidi leader who'd been resisting the Ottomans, consolidated his power and established the Mutawakkilite Kingdom of Yemen in the north. His goal? To rule over all of Yemen, including that British-held south.
This sounds like a recipe for conflict.
It was.
You've got two Yemens, each with their own ambitions. Did they ever clash directly?
Tensions between North and South were pretty much a constant during this period. They even fought a brief war in 1972, though it ended in a stalemate.
Two Yemens divided. It's a familiar story throughout history, isn't it?
It really is. And it's important to understand that these two Yemens represented very different political systems.
Okay.
You had the North, under the traditional rule of the Imam, and the South, after gaining independence from Britain in 1967, embracing a socialist model. We're talking about stark contrasts in ideology and governance.
Okay, so for those of us who slept through history class,
Sure.
what exactly does embracing a socialist model mean in this context?
Essentially, South Yemen's government took control of most industries and aimed to redistribute wealth more equally. Think state-run farms and factories, free healthcare and education, a very different approach to the more traditional tribal-based system in the north.
So you've got this Cold War dynamic playing out within Yemen itself. Did this ideological divide contribute to the animosity between North and South?
It definitely played a role. The North, under Imam Yahya and later his son Ahmad bin Yahya, maintained a more conservative and isolationist approach. While the South aligned itself with the Soviet Union and other communist nations, it was a recipe for tension.
And this tension continued even after unification, which the article says happened in 1990. How did they finally manage to bridge that divide?
The push for unification had been gaining momentum for years,
Okay.
fueled by a sense of shared identity and the very human desire to overcome past divisions. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 and the collapse of the Soviet Union also played a major role. Suddenly, the South's socialist ideology lost its main supporter.
It sounds like a perfect storm of internal and external factors aligning to make unification possible.
Exactly. Both sides saw a chance to create a stronger, more unified Yemen. Ali Abdullah Saleh, who had been president of North Yemen since 1978, became the president of the newly unified Republic of Yemen.
Saleh, a name that seems to pop up a lot in recent Yemeni history.
Indeed.
That article mentions him ruling for over 3 decades. What was his leadership style like?
He was a very shrewd political operator.
Okay.
He knew how to consolidate power and navigate the complex tribal and political landscape of Yemen. However, his rule was also marked by corruption and authoritarianism,
Right.
which, as you can imagine, eventually led to his downfall.
And that downfall came with the 2011 Yemeni Revolution,
Right.
part of that wave of Arab Spring uprisings that swept across the region.
Exactly. Inspired by what they were seeing in Tunisia and Egypt, Yemenists took to the streets demanding political reforms, economic justice, and an end to Saleh's rule.
The article mentions massive crowds of protesters often facing violent crackdowns by Saleh's forces.
Unfortunately, yes.
It must have taken incredible courage to stand up against that kind of repression.
It did. And despite the brutality, the protesters persisted, forcing Saleh to step down in 2012 after months of unrest. There was this brief moment of hope, a sense that Yemen was finally on the verge of a more democratic future.
But as we know, things took a turn.
They did.
The article goes on to describe a descent into civil war, a conflict that continues even today.
It does.
And as with so much of Yemen's story, this conflict has deep roots.
It does.
The unresolved grievances of the south, the rise of the Houthi movement in the north, the ever-present threat of terrorism, they all converge to create what can only be described as a perfect storm.
A recipe for disaster.
Okay, so let's break down those factors one by one. You mentioned the grievances of the south. What were those about specifically? Did unification not bring the equality they were hoping for?
Even after unification, a lot of Southerners felt marginalized and discriminated against by the Northern-dominated government.
Really?
They had legitimate complaints, economic disparities, political exclusion, lack of autonomy.
Right.
These grievances never really went away, and they fueled separatist sentiments that resurfaced with a vengeance after the 2011 revolution.
So the old wounds between North and South were never truly healed.
Exactly. They were simmering just below the surface, ready to erupt when the political situation shifted.
And then you have the Houthis. The article describes them as a Zaidi Shia movement that's been gaining power in the north. What are their goals? Are they fighting for religious freedom, political power, or something else entirely?
It's a complex mix. The Houthis emerged as a major force in the early 2000s. Okay. Initially fighting what they saw as government corruption and discrimination against Zaydis.
Right.
Their ideology is really a blend of religious, political, and tribal elements, making them difficult to pin down.
Okay.
Essentially, they want greater autonomy for the north and a much bigger say in how Yemen is run.
So they're tapping into those long-standing Zaidi grievances.
They are.
The article mentions them launching a major offensive in 2014, even capturing the capital, Sana'a. This wasn't just a small uprising then.
Their advance took a lot of people by surprise.
Yeah.
It exposed the weaknesses of the Yemeni government and its army. They managed to drive President Hadi Saleh's successor out of the capital and eventually into exile in Saudi Arabia. It was a major power shift.
And this is where things get really messy.
It does.
The article describes Saudi Arabia launching a full-blown military intervention in 2015 with the goal of restoring Hadi to power and pushing back against the Houthis.
And that intervention, backed by a coalition of Arab states and supported by the United States, dramatically escalated the conflict, turning it into a devastating proxy war.
The article doesn't sugarcoat things either. It talks about airstrikes, ground battles, and a humanitarian crisis of unimaginable proportions. Millions displaced people facing starvation and disease, a total collapse of essential services. It's hard to even comprehend.
It's a tragedy that's only gotten worse over time.
Yeah.
The Saudi-led blockade has crippled Yemen's economy, cutting off those vital supplies of food, fuel, and medicine. You've got hospitals, overwhelmed children, dying from preventable diseases, entire communities on the brink of famine.
It's times like this when I'm reminded that behind all the geopolitical chess moves and power grabs, there are real human beings suffering the consequences.
It's a sobering thought.
Yeah.
And we have to remember the complex web of alliances and rivalries fueling this conflict. The Houthis are accused of receiving support from Saudi Arabia's regional rival, while the Saudi intervention has faced criticism for causing so many civilian casualties and making the humanitarian crisis even worse.
So you have this multi-layered conflict with no easy answers.
Unfortunately.
Each side pushing its own agenda while the Yemeni people are caught in the middle.
It's a very difficult situation.
And to make matters worse, the article also mentions that this conflict has created fertile ground for terrorism.
It has.
The article mentions groups like Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula or AQAP exploiting the chaos to expand their influence.
They're a serious threat.
AQAP, that name sends chills down my spine. They've been linked to numerous terrorist attacks, including some targeting the United States.
They have been.
Yeah.
AQAP has been active in Yemen for years, taking advantage of the weak governance and porous borders. This current conflict has actually strengthened their position, giving them more space to operate and recruit. It's a dangerous situation all around.
It really is. And as if things weren't complex enough already, the article also sheds light on Yemen's social hierarchy, mentioning tribal divisions and even the persistence of slavery in the 21st century. It's a tragic reality.
It is, and those deep-rooted social structures play a huge role in shaping Yemen's political landscape. Tribal loyalties often overshadow national identity, and what's left of the caste system contributes to a lot of the inequality and discrimination.
It sounds like overcoming those divisions is essential if Yemen ever hopes to find a path to peace and stability. It's about more than just ending the war. It's about addressing those systemic issues.
I completely agree. Building a more inclusive and equitable society where all Yemenis feel represented and have a stake in the country's future, that's crucial. Easier said than done, of course,
Right.
but essential nonetheless.
Absolutely. The article also highlights Yemen's severe water scarcity, describing it as one of the most water-stressed countries in the world. It seems like these issues are interconnected, wouldn't you say?
They're definitely intertwined.
Hmm.
This is a challenge that has plagued Yemen for centuries, going back to the ancient Sabaeans and that great dam of Marib we discussed earlier. Climate change, population growth, and poor management of water resources have turned a long-standing problem into a full-blown crisis.
The article paints a bleak picture. Groundwater reserves, drying up wells, running dry, even the capital city on the verge of running out of water entirely.
It's a harsh reality.
Hmm.
Water scarcity fuels conflict and instability. When access to water becomes a matter of life or death, it creates competition between communities and undermines any effort to build a stable future.
It's a stark reminder that environmental challenges don't exist in a vacuum. They're directly tied to political and social issues. This deep dive has been incredibly eye-opening, to say the least. We've uncovered so much about Yemen's history, culture, and the current situation. It's heavy stuff, but it's clear that Yemen is a country grappling with immense challenges, both from within and outside its borders.
It is, but we can't forget that Yemen is also a country with a rich heritage, resilient people, and I believe a deep-seated yearning for peace and a better future.
It's, like you said earlier, it's not just a conflict zone. It's a country with a rich and complex story, one that deserves to be understood and appreciated. Well said. On that note, thanks for joining us on this journey to understand Yemen a little bit better. Until next time.